There is a person, and you might recognize them, who can walk into any room and within 60 seconds know exactly who is upset, who is pretending, who is one comment away from breaking. They can read people like they've been doing it their whole lives. Because they have. They are the friend everyone calls at midnight. The colleague who always knows what the boss actually needs. The partner who anticipates everything, sometimes before you've even felt it yourself. And yet, ask that person what they want for dinner, and they freeze. Ask them what they need from a relationship, and they go quiet in a way that feels like the question landed in a room with no furniture. Ask them, point blank, "How are you really doing?" And they'll give you a smile and 11 words and change the subject so smoothly you almost don't notice. This is not a coincidence. And it is not a personality flaw. What I'm about to show you is that the very thing that makes some people impossibly attuned to others is the exact same mechanism that left them completely blind to themselves. And that mechanism was built, carefully, systematically, invisibly, during childhood. Not by monsters. Not through dramatic events. But through the quiet, daily accumulation of one specific experience. The experience of being emotionally erased. Here is the question this video is going to answer. How does a child lose access to their own inner world? What is happening in the brain when that occurs? And this is the part that actually changes things. What does it take to find that signal again, when you've spent your whole life not even knowing it went missing? Stay with me. Because where this goes is not where you expect. Before we get to the science, I need you to actually feel what we're talking about. Not intellectually grasp it. Feel it. Because there is a good chance you have been intellectualizing your experience for a very long time, and that habit, it turns out, is part of the pattern. So let me describe your life. Tell me if I'm close. You are remarkable at being whatever the room needs. In a conflict, you become the peacemaker, before anyone asks you to. In a crisis, you become the calm one, almost automatically. With someone fragile, you soften. With someone who needs fixing, you become patient in a way that surprises even you. You shapeshift so naturally, so automatically, that you have received genuine compliments about it your entire life. You're so easy to be around. You just get people. "I don't know what I'd do without you." And those compliments feel good. For about 3 seconds. Then they feel like a cage. Because here is what no one sees. Behind every perfectly calibrated response, behind every "I'm fine," and "whatever works for you," there is a person who genuinely does not know what they think, feel, or want when no one else is in the room to give them a cue. Let me make this real for you. You're sitting on the couch with someone you love, deciding what to watch. They say, "I don't care, you pick." And you feel this immediate, low-grade panic. Not dramatic. Just a quiet tightening. Because the honest answer is, you don't know. You scroll for 20 minutes and eventually just pick something based on what you think they'd probably prefer. And they never know. And you barely notice. Or you're in a group conversation, and someone says something you don't agree with. The disagreement starts to form somewhere inside you, and then, before it fully arrives, you hear yourself say, "Yeah, totally." You didn't decide to agree. You didn't even consciously choose to stay quiet. The thought just dissolved before it could become a word. And you nod along, vaguely off-key, like a song played in the wrong key, feeling something you can't name. Or this one, the most disorienting version of all. You can be surrounded by people who love you, in the middle of a great evening, everything going well by any measure, and feel this hollow, aching nothing. And have no idea what it is. And not be able to tell anyone, including yourself. That hollow nothing has a name. And understanding it is going to reframe your entire story. Here is how it starts. Follow this closely, because the mechanism is precise and most people have never had it explained to them this way. Every human brain is born with what researchers call a downstairs and an upstairs. The downstairs brain, deep, ancient, primitive, is where your raw survival signals live. Fear, hunger, pain, longing. It screams in the body before it ever reaches the mind. A child's downstairs brain is extremely loud and has absolutely no filter. It doesn't know how to explain itself. It only knows how to feel. The upstairs brain, the prefrontal cortex, is where the sophisticated stuff lives. Reflection, perspective, the ability to say, "I'm falling apart right now because I'm exhausted, not because the world is actually ending." This floor is quiet, precise. And here is the part that changes everything once you understand it. It does not build itself. It gets built, stair by stair, every single time a caregiver bridges the gap between what a child is feeling downstairs and what that feeling actually means. Picture it concretely. A small child melts down over something that seems trivial, a broken cracker, a lost toy. And instead of, "Stop that," the parent crouches down, looks them in the eyes and says, "Hey, I see you. You're really upset right now. That makes sense." In that exact moment, the parent is not just managing behavior. They are laying neural architecture, literally wiring the upstairs floor into existence, one moment of attunement at a time. Each time it happens, another stair. Thousands of those moments, across childhood, and the child develops what researchers call interiority, an inner life. The capacity to look inward and find something there. To ask, "What am I feeling?" and actually receive an answer back. Now hold that image, because I want you to feel the weight of what happens when those moments don't come. The child says, "I'm scared," and the adult says, "There's nothing to be scared of." The child cries, and the parent says, "Stop it, you're fine." The child reaches for comfort and gets distraction, impatience, or silence. And this isn't once. It is Tuesday, and Wednesday, and the Tuesday after that, and the one after that. Something very precise happens inside that child. And it is not them getting stronger. Here is a fact about human children that reshapes everything. Attachment to a caregiver is not optional. It is not a preference. For a child, the emotional connection to the person who keeps them alive is as biological as breathing. You do not choose to need it any more than you choose to need oxygen. So when a child's emotional experiences are consistently denied, minimized, or met with irritation, the child is trapped between two needs that cannot both exist at the same time. The need to feel what they feel, and the need to stay connected to the person they cannot survive without. And so they make the only rational choice available. They choose the attachment. And they sacrifice the feelings. Not all at once. Not consciously. The brain just gradually, quietly, efficiently, stops routing signal through the pathways that lead to pain. "I am hungry," fires. Gets intercepted before it becomes a want, because want feels like danger. "I am sad," rises. Gets rerouted into numbness, because sadness was never safe to have. Month after month, year after year, the internal broadcast system goes quieter and quieter and quieter. Psychologist Richard Schwartz describes what comes next with a precision that should stop you cold. He says children don't just suppress their needs. They translate experience directly into identity. "My needs are not being met" doesn't stay as a situation. It becomes, "My needs are a burden," and "My needs are a burden," over enough time, with enough repetition, becomes the deepest, most unquestioned belief a person can carry. "I have no needs." Not as a thought. Not as a choice. As a fact of the body. Take a breath. Seriously, just for a moment. If what I just described feels less like a psychology video and more like someone narrating something you've never had words for, that reaction is itself meaningful. It is the signal trying to break through. And I want to make sure I'm talking about something real before we go further. This is not a pattern that belongs to people who had dramatic childhoods. It is not reserved for those who experienced obvious abuse or neglect. Emotional erasure happens in homes that looked, from the outside, and often from the inside, completely normal. It happens when parents loved deeply but were themselves emotionally erased and simply had no model for how to attune to a child's inner world. It happens in families where everyone was fed and housed and cared for, and yet the unspoken rule was, big feelings are inconvenient. We don't do that here. Researcher Bruce Perry documented a case of a child named Laura who stopped growing, not because she wasn't being fed, but because she wasn't being emotionally reached. Her body, receiving no signal that she was truly wanted, literally turned off her growth hormones. Not as a metaphor, as a physiological fact. And Laura's mother, Virginia, loved her daughter. She wasn't cruel. She knew everything a mother was supposed to do. But Virginia had grown up in foster care, moved from home to home, never held long enough for her own inner world to be witnessed. She couldn't feel the connection because her own emotional world had been erased before she had language for it. That is how this travels. Not through genetics. Through the gap between knowing and feeling. Through generations of people loving each other as fully as they could, from behind a wall they didn't know was there. But here is where the story takes a turn almost no one anticipates. And this part might genuinely shift something. Because what if the very thing that erased your inner world also made you extraordinary? When the internal world goes offline, the brain does not go dark. The brain is not in the business of going dark. It redirects. It takes every bit of processing power that was supposed to go inward, and aims it outward. At people. At the external environment. At the emotional temperature of every room you walk into. Because here is the brutal logic of it. If your own feelings are no longer a reliable guide to whether you're safe or loved, then you had better become very, very good at reading everything else. You had better learn to detect the tension in someone's jaw before they know it's there. The specific pause that means they're hurt but won't say it. The difference between a fine, that means fine, and a fine, that is the last word before a door closes quietly. And so you did. You built a radar so finely calibrated it borders on the uncanny. You became, in essence, a master translator of other people's inner worlds, precisely because you were not allowed to live inside your own. That is real. It is extraordinary. It is why people feel genuinely seen by you in ways they rarely feel with anyone else. But there is a shadow side to this. A cost that has been compounding quietly your entire life. And this is the part that doesn't get said. The radar doesn't know that childhood is over. It is still running. In every room. Every dinner. Every conversation. Right now, probably in some corner of your nervous system, it is scanning, calibrating, adjusting. Burning enormous energy to do one thing: maintain the connection. Keep everyone comfortable. Make sure no one is disappointed. And the way it does that is by continuously, automatically, erasing you. Think about the last time you genuinely disagreed with someone important to you. Not a debate, just a real, personal difference. Maybe they said something dismissive about something that mattered to you. And you felt the flinch, that internal. Actually, that's not right. Rise up. And then, before you could even fully form the thought, you heard yourself smoothing it over. Laughing along. Redirecting. And by the time the conversation moved on, even you weren't completely sure what you had felt. That is not conflict avoidance. That is something deeper. That is a nervous system that learned, at a foundational level, that being known is more dangerous than being invisible. And it is protecting you the only way it knows how, by making sure you disappear before anyone can reject what they see. The long-term cost of living this way is an exhaustion that doesn't respond to sleep. It is the experience of being completely present for everyone and completely absent from yourself. It is arriving at your 30s, or your 40s, and realizing that the life you've built, the relationships, the roles, the reputation, was constructed almost entirely around what other people needed from you. And underneath all of it, you have almost no idea who you actually are. That is not a small cost. That is the cost of surviving in the only way you knew how. So what actually changes it? Not insight alone. I want to be direct about that. You can understand everything I've just said, follow every step of the logic, and still go home tonight and say, "I'm fine," when you're not, without even noticing. Understanding is the beginning, not the destination. What actually changes the pattern is 4 specific shifts in practice. The first one is this: stop asking, "What do I need?" For someone who is emotionally erased, that question is like asking a person who hasn't spoken in years to immediately deliver a speech. The system seizes up before it can begin. Instead, ask what your body is physically doing right now. Not emotionally. Physically. Is there tightness in your chest? Shallow breathing? A weight behind your eyes? A kind of hollow quiet somewhere under your ribs? These are not metaphors. They are transmissions. Your nervous system has been broadcasting them your entire life. You are, perhaps for the first time, actually listening. This is the first act of coming back to yourself. Not expressing a need. Not asking for something. Just noticing, with genuine curiosity, not judgment, that a need exists. That is not a small step. For someone who has spent their life operating as if they have no inner world, noticing one flicker of it is the moment the signal starts coming back. The second shift carries the most weight. Most emotionally erased adults are quietly running on an implicit story that goes, "I had a normal enough childhood. I'm just bad at feelings. Something is fundamentally off about me." That story keeps the erasure intact, because as long as you are the problem, you keep doing the work of erasing yourself. Automatically. Without anyone asking. Replace it with the one that is actually true. "I was a child who needed emotional mirroring and didn't consistently receive it. My brain adapted brilliantly for survival. That adaptation is now costly for living. I am not broken. I am the logical outcome of what I experienced." This is not about blame. It is about accuracy. The research is clear. The single strongest predictor of emotional recovery is not what happened to you. It's whether you can construct an honest, coherent account of it. One that moves you from, "I am defective," to, "I adapted." The brain organizes itself around narrative. Give it a true one. The third shift is the most immediately terrifying in practice. It is learning to stay present in your own reality when someone else reacts to your need. Here is the scene most people know intimately. You finally say something real. You ask for space. You express a preference. You gently push back on something. And before the other person has even fully responded, you feel their discomfort. You feel it in your body. And the old alarm fires. You caused a rupture. Take it back. Fix it. Before you lose the connection. Within seconds, you're apologizing for a boundary you hadn't even fully stated. Here is the image that actually helps. Imagine a tennis court. Your need, your boundary, your preference, that lives on your side of the net. Their reaction, their disappointment, their surprise, their momentary frustration, that lives on their side. You are not responsible for what happens on their side. Trying to fix it by abandoning your own need is not kindness. It is you erasing yourself. Again. For the 1000th time. Two things are allowed to exist simultaneously. You can be a genuinely loving person, and someone you love can be temporarily disappointed by your boundary. Both. The healing is in learning to sit with that tension, without collapsing it, without crossing the net to fix something you didn't break. The fourth shift is the quietest, and in many ways the most radical. It is learning to witness yourself the way you were never witnessed. Not affirmations. Not abstract declarations of worth. The specific, consistent act of noticing your internal experience and describing it. Out loud or in writing. Not, I did well today. But, I was afraid to speak up in that conversation, and I did it anyway. My hands were shaking. I kept going. The narration of the actual lived moment. What you felt, what it cost, that you did it anyway. This is what researchers call descriptive self-witnessing, and it is doing exactly what was missing in childhood. It is saying to your own experience, I see you. You are real. You matter. One moment at a time. The staircase that was never built. This is how you build it. Not in a breakthrough. Not all at once. One noticed sensation, one honest narration, one moment of staying on your own side of the net at a time. And slowly, not dramatically, but genuinely, the signal gets louder. Not because something new was installed, but because you finally stopped treating it like it didn't exist. Here is what I want to leave you with. Your entire life, you have been searching for yourself and other people's reactions. In their approval, their comfort, the look on their face when you walk into a room. Not because you are needy or broken, but because that is where you were trained to look. Your brain learned, early and accurately, that the safest version of you was the one that took up the least space. And it has been protecting you that way ever since. But that protection has a cost. And you know the cost. You have been carrying it for years, in the tightness in your chest you can't explain, in the hollow feeling you take home after days that should have felt full, in the pause before you say, I'm fine. That contains something much larger than fine. That pause is the signal. It never disappeared. It was muted, carefully, protectively, so you could keep going when you had no other choice. You have a choice now. The work of coming back to yourself is not glamorous. There is no single moment where it clicks. It is the quiet, repetitive, courageous act of asking, what is my body telling me right now? Before you ask, what does everyone else need from me? It is noticing one sensation. Staying on your side of the net once. Narrating one honest moment to yourself like it actually matters. Because it does. More than almost anything else you will do today. You may always speak the language of self-knowledge with a slight accent. It may always take you a beat longer to locate what you feel than it does for someone who never had to silence it. That accent is not a flaw. It is evidence of someone who learned under impossible conditions and never stopped trying to understand themselves. You survived your childhood by becoming invisible. The rest of your life begins the moment you decide to be seen, starting with the only person who was always there. The only one who has the actual power to change this. You. If this video described something you've spent years trying to name, that feeling of being fluent in everyone else's interior world and a stranger in your own, this channel is built for you. We go deep here. Not surface-level motivation, not quick fixes. Real, research-grounded psychology that takes your inner world seriously. If that matters to you, subscribing is how you keep showing up for yourself. And I want to hear from you right now. Comment below. Does this pattern show up more for you in conversations or in decisions? Just one word if that's all you have. Because naming it is the first moment you stop being invisible to yourself. And that is exactly where this begins.